Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Faith and Recovery Live. And once again, I am outdoors. It appears that there are some storm clouds headed my way, so I may have to move into the car here shortly if it starts to rain. And then the lighting will get horrible, but until then, we'll just enjoy what we have. I didn't realize when I came out that it was going to be this dark and yucky looking, but hey. So the topics that we've been discussing, faith and recovery, we've talked about the addiction cycle, we've talked about the shame cycle, we've talked about neurochemistry of addiction, how the dopamine is involved, how that produces cravings and how it intensifies, and so on and so forth. And what I asked was for people to put things in the comments to bring up for discussion. And so I had a couple takers. So shout out to Brent, my friend from seminary, and also my fellow traveling companion in Germany. We saw a lot of Germany together. I don't know if you knew this, man, but that pair of shoes that I brought with me was newer than I thought it was. And especially on that one day where we walked, like we followed that family, we walked that whole trip down to like the old train station and everything. Like the only thought in my mind was, don't wince, don't wince, don't wince. I was trying so hard not to show that my foot was killing me. But anyway, and also my friend Jennifer, fellow healthcare provider and fellow journeyer on the road of recovery. So these two people stepped up and offered some material for us to look at today. So the first thing was the topic of boundaries and how do boundaries interact with faith and recovery, and just some information about boundaries. When I think about boundaries, when I talk about boundaries, and especially in the context of faith and recovery, the first thing that comes to mind is the idea of offense. So in the story of America, United States of America, one of the things that happened was the invention of barbed wire. And barbed wire was introduced into the American West. And for better or for worse, I'm just looking at the sky. I think it may go over me. We'll see. For better or for worse, barbed wire changed the story of the American West, because what it did was it made it possible for one person with kind of a skeleton crew of cowhands to hold as their own large portions of ground. So before, pretty much anybody that was trying to hold a piece of land, you had to have a lot of people to hold a lot of land. Well, this barbed wire invention basically leveled the playing field and allowed like small groups of people to hold large portions of ground. And what a fence does is it proclaims a line, and it says what's inside this line belongs to me. What's outside this line does not belong to me. And in their most basic function, man, I'm really fascinated by these clouds. I'm sorry, guys. They're moving super fast, and there's this weird line. It's like a border, like a straight line in the sky. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that before. I don't think it means anything bad. Anyway, sorry to be preoccupied with meteorology. In its most basic function, that's what a fence is. That's what a boundary is. It says what's inside belongs to me, what's outside belongs to you. Now, this can be in the positive sense. So this can be saying, so in the American West, it was, I want to keep these cows as belonging to me, and they're going to be inside my fence. So what belongs to me is inside, and that's a positive thing. I'm going to keep what belongs to me. I'm not going to let it escape. I'm not going to let it get away from me. What belongs to me, I'm going to keep with me. That's the positive sense. But then there's also the negative sense of what does not belong to me is not going to come into me. So I have this fence, and your belongings are going to stay out there. What belongs to you is not going to come into my area. In its most basic sense, that's what a boundary does. It allows me to keep and to hold what is mine, and it allows me to refuse and reject what is not mine. How does this play out in faith and recovery? Well, with our faith, this a lot of times shows up in what we believe, how we choose to believe. We can draw a boundary and say, this is how I believe, and this is what I accept, and this is a foundation my life is built on. But we don't get to say that about somebody else. We don't get to decide. We don't get to believe for somebody else. We don't get to choose for somebody else. In the concept of believing loyalty, we are able to say for ourselves, this is the God that is my God. I choose this God as mine. But we don't have the right to choose the God of somebody else. That's kind of the positive. In the negative, in our faith, there are times when we can actually benefit by saying, this is not what I believe. This is not what I stand for. This is not what I am loyal to. And I'm not going to allow it to come into my life. Boundaries are a mechanism. They're an extension. They're a function of something even more basic, and that's relationship. So relationship says there are two objects, two persons, two entities, two ideas, two somethings or more, and there's space between them. There's distance between them. That's the relationship. The relationship is the correlation between two things that are not each other. And boundaries is how that space, how that difference is structured, how that is used, how it is responded to. That's what boundaries do. It shapes and gives form to that relationship. So in our faith, sometimes our relationships are with a faith leader, say a pastor or a mentor. Especially if we're the one being mentored, if we're the mentee, if we're the person that's learning and receiving, then it can be difficult sometimes to have solid and safe boundaries where we say, okay, you're the one being my mentor, you're the one sharing with me, but this part is me. This part belongs to me. This is your sharing, and then I'm over here. This is what I'm actually going to be. For example, let's say maybe I, Brian, am being mentored by someone, and they say, well, in order to be effective in your faith or your recovery, you're going to have to go to meetings every night of the week. So if I have no boundaries, or if I have very poor boundaries, if there's holes in my barbed wire fence, then I'm just going to go to meetings every night of the week because my mentor said so. That is not necessarily always bad to have those kind of relationships. But what is certain is that you can't stay alive long in that kind of a relationship. And it is going to start raining, so I am going to move inside of my vehicle. I apologize once again for the lighting. Hopefully by the end of the month, I'll have a better setup to where I don't have to look like a face floating in the darkness on the screen. My apologies. So that can be, sorry, that's my classical music. That can be helpful. But there's no way for us to live a long time with no boundaries. So in that situation, there would have to come a point where I would say, you know what, my mentee, my mentor relationship needs some boundaries. It needs some definition. It needs something to kind of give it some structure and some shape. So I'm going to put some boundaries around this. And I would be like, okay, so my mentor says I need to be meetings every night of the week. I'm going to go to meetings 3 nights a week. And that's going to be my boundary. And what they believe and what they've told me is on the outside, and what I'm doing is on the inside. That could be how that would show up in faith or recovery. A few things to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are in different levels. So one way to think about it, and I don't think this is original with me, but this is something that I have used before, is to think not about barbed wire, because that's a fence. But let's carry the analogy a little bit different direction. Think about those old castles that they used to have back in the days of knights and dragons and stuff like that. You have kind of a wooden stockade fence around the whole town. Now, in the middle of the town is the castle, but at the edge of the town, at the outside there's like this stockade fence. It's like wood, it's trees, like logs kind of stuck in the ground next to each other. So you have like this fence of logs, and that's your fence, that's your wall. When you come inside the town, then there is the castle wall. Now, the castle wall is probably, 20 feet high, maybe. It's thick. It's got little narrow windows in it that you can just see out of to shoot at the enemies. It's got this big gate in it that you have to have like a bridge to come inside. It's got this ditch around it, this big, heavy, thick wall. That's your castle wall. But inside this big, thick castle wall is something called a keep. Now, the walls of the castle are about 20 feet tall, which is about twice as tall as the walls on the edge of the town, which are about 10 feet tall. But on the inside of the castle wall, the keep is about 60 feet tall. It's enormous compared to the other walls. The outer boundaries of the town are pretty much what we would call our first set of boundaries. This is how we relate to people at work, or maybe people at the store, people that we often know from church or from our recovery group. They're inside that first wall. We let them be inside that first wall. Now, there's people that are outside the wall, people I'm driving down the road next to. I see them, but we don't really interact. We don't have much of a relationship. Maybe there's a coworker that's on opposite shift from me, and we wave each other, we talk to each other on the way past each other in and out of the building, but they're outside the wall. Distant relatives, people that I am technically connected to some way, but we don't really interact. They're outside the wall. But then inside the wall is people that I interact with on a fairly, frequent basis. These are people that know me and I know them. They're inside that first line of boundaries. But then there's the people that are inside the next level of boundaries, and they're inside the castle wall. Now, inside the castle wall, these are people that I would consider close. These are people that are in my immediate family. These are relatives that I like, relatives that I claim, I guess you could say. These are recovery people that know my story. These are people that I have done life with, that love me and I love them, and we care about each other, and we mean something to each other. That would be inside that second wall. In a faith community, this might be maybe if we have a good relationship with our pastor, they might be inside that second wall. If we have maybe a Sunday school teacher, or maybe we are a Sunday school teacher, or we lead a class, we lead a group, we're gonna have people inside that second wall. But then there's that third one called the keep. That's the really, really big, tall walls that are 60 feet tall. Really, honestly, there's not a whole lot of people inside there. Maybe one or two. But the most important person inside that inner wall is actually you, me. We are inside that wall. Now, why are we by ourselves inside that wall? because that's where our choice lives. That's where our decisions live. That's where our will lives. If we are a follower of Jesus, that's where our faith lives, is inside that inner wall. And what makes that inner wall so different is that nobody has complete and total access there except us. You say, what about my spouse? They can come in and visit, but they have their own castle across the valley, okay? They have themselves. They have their place where they are themselves. And so it is important when we make these boundaries, because a lot of times it's very easy for us to be thinking outward with all of our boundaries and be thinking of, well, I'm going to, set a boundary so this person can't tell me what to do. I'm going to set a boundary so this person doesn't take over my life. It's easy for us to forget that the boundaries it's all about how do we live on the inside. We forget to set boundaries for ourselves. To instead of we put a boundary against the other person, we should put it for us. And so that's something to think about with boundaries. Another thing to think about with boundaries is that if you have a wall, you got to have a gate. If you build that inner wall and you put yourself in there and you don't put a gate of some sort, you don't put any way to get in and out, you're going to die after a while. No food, no water. You got to have a gate. You also have to have windows. Okay, you got to have windows in the castle, or there's not going to be any air or light in it, and then maybe you don't die quickly, but eventually you run out of air. And who wants to live without sunlight? So you got to have gates. You got to have windows. Even in your castle wall, that's a little bit shorter, a little bit more ground is covered. You got to have gates. You got to have windows. What's the function of that? Well, a gate is where things can go in and out. People can come in and out. You want to be able to have people coming in and out of your life. You don't want to have a life where the people that are in the walls never get out and the people outside the walls never get in. This is what you call blind loyalty. This is what you call a stagnant life. No new people are coming in and no old people ever go out. You want to be able to move people in and out of your boundaries. What about windows? Well, windows are where people don't go in and out, but influence comes in and out. Maybe music can come through, or light can come through, or sound or voices can come through. The person themselves can't come through, but ideas can come through. You want to have things like that. And you want to have more windows than you do gates, okay? You want to have more ideas and light coming in to areas where maybe only one or two people come in. You want to be allowing new things to come in and old things to come out. You want to air out the castle from time to time, not have your insides be sealed, because that's where dark things grow, and we don't want that. I think one last thing to think about with boundaries is that they can be moved. Boundaries can be moved. You can set a boundary here and say, okay, well, we're gonna build the castle wall here, and maybe in 20 years, you need to move that wall. So you tear down the old wall, you build a new one. Your wooden wall at the very edge of the town, that can be moved very easily. You can move that. It's not hard to tear down and rebuild somewhere else. Your castle wall takes a little bit more doing, to be honest. That keep in the middle that's 60 feet tall, chances are you won't be moving that much. Think how this corresponds with our life. Where we work, where we shop, this changes a lot. The people we really care about, the people that we really do life with, that changes some, but not as much as maybe our job. Who we are, what we really are on the inside, it's sometimes a lot more about discovery than it is actual remodeling. It's a lot more about accepting, coming to grips with the castle we've inherited, than it is about necessarily remodeling ourselves. Yeah, there's some remodeling. I'm not saying there's none, but it's a lot more about saying, oh, okay, well, how can I use this? How can I turn this to the good? But boundaries can be moved. We do recover. We do get better. We do become more what God originally intended for us to be. And Our relationships can change. We can change our family. We can change who we allow to be close to us. We can change where we go to church. We can change what groups we go to. We can change the people we hang around with. We can move our boundaries. In our relationships, we can move our boundaries. Yes, this was okay for us to talk about years ago, but now this is not something I want to talk about. Yes, it was okay for you to do this thing for me and me to do this thing for you years ago, but now I'm going to do that for myself, and I trust you're able to do that for yourself. We can move boundaries. They don't have to be static. They don't have to be stuck in one spot. If you found that boundaries conversation helpful, let me know and put a comment or like or heart this Facebook Live. The next topic is complacency. Now, complacency, when I first saw that word, I thought, oh my. Complacency is something that sneaks up on us. Complacency is something that is kind of like the shadow version of good things. There are good things like acceptance and contentment. That these are positive things. But then if those are cut off from their life source, or if those are not kept healthy and in the right kind of attitude, then they drift into something called complacency. So first, maybe we should ask what complacency is. Now, honestly, I'm shooting from the hip. I did not look this up, but I would say complacency, probably a working definition, would be something along the lines of being unwilling to make changes due to the comfort of my current location. So if I'm sitting in my recliner and I know I should get up because there's work to be done in the house, but I'm not going to get up, I'm complacent. Or maybe another picture, let's say I'm an athlete, which I'm not an athlete, but let's say I am an athlete for the sake of this example, and I know if I trained harder, I could maybe get first place, but I know that if I don't train at all, I can do whatever I want to this weekend, and I can still get third place. So I'm just going to get third place. I'm not going to worry about first place. So in complacency, there's this idea of settling for less, of knowing that if I put forth more effort, I would receive more benefit, but I'm going to settle for less. I'm going to say, you know what, the risk-benefit, I don't know that I really care that much about more, so I'm going to settle for less. That's kind of the idea of complacency. So where does complacency come from? Well, complacency begins in a good place. It comes to us in a good place. It comes from good things. When someone is fighting for their life, they're not complacent. When someone is having to choose every single action to make sure it counts, they're not complacent. When someone is having to make hard decisions in order to decide the outcome of things that have weighty consequences for years to come and they're grappling, they're not complacent. We get complacent when things get good. We get complacent the further we get from things that are bad. When things are good is when we actually start to settle into complacency. You may have heard the phrase, I'm not even going to try to figure out who said it first because I looked it up once and I've forgotten. Hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make hard times. There's a cycle to this. And that point in the cycle where good times make weak men, that's complacency. When we have it good is when we're in danger of falling into complacency. When we have achieved, when we have accomplished, when we have taken ground, that's when it's easier, or possible even, to become complacent. Now, how would we avoid, well, before we go there, what would be some dangers of complacency? I think the first danger of complacency is that if we become complacent in our recovery, and I would say even in our faith, but let's keep it in recovery for right now. If we become complacent in our recovery, what we lose is forward motion. Now, I'm sorry, this is just the picture that comes to my mind. If you are, well, I don't know if you ever have had a pet fish, but you'll notice sometimes they'll just be sitting in the water and they'll just kind of drift slowly forward. They'll just kind of barely kind of, I hate to say float because that's what fish do, but they're just kind of sitting in the water, just barely moving. Okay, do you know why they're barely moving? You see them open their mouth and kind of close their mouth. They're just kind of, just kind of sitting there, but they're just kind of inching forward or to the side. They're just barely moving. The reason they're doing that is because water flowing over their gills is how they get oxygen. Because as the water goes over their gills, it's kind of like when we breathe in air into our lungs. The air goes in, the exchange happens, and the air goes out. With a fish, the water comes in, the exchange happens, and the water goes out. That's why if you had a fish, you probably have a little bubbler in the tank to put air back in. Anyway, sorry, side tangent. If there's no forward motion, if there's nothing flowing over those gills, then the fish dies. If we don't breathe, we die. If there's not new air coming in, if we're not taking in, then we die. Complacency is when we stop taking in. We stop choosing to go a little further. We stop taking ground. We stop making new choices. We stop making new decisions in our recoveries. So, for example, let's say I've been sober for maybe a year and a half, and it occurs to me that the time that I go to group every week, if I would take that time, and if I would, instead of going to group, go home and rest, I might feel better. Now, that may be true. I'm not saying that rest is bad, but I'm saying in that moment I have a choice. Am I going to continue doing the work that I have already had to do in order to get to where I'm at? Or am I going to dial it down just a little bit because I feel like I've arrived somewhere? I've got some time under my belt. I'm doing okay. I don't need to push this hard. I don't need to stretch myself this hard. That's moving into complacency. What am I losing? I'm losing momentum. I'm not moving forward like I was. Another thing that we lose if we settle into complacency, we lose alertness. So if you've ever gone hunting or been with a hunter, one of the things that they will try to do is they will try to be as least disruptive as possible to whatever they're hunting. They don't want the deer or the turkey or the goose or the whatever to be aware that there's something there that they need to be concerned about. They want the animal to settle down, not be worried about danger, not be worried about any predators, just feel relaxed and everything's okay and nothing could be wrong. That's why they wear camouflage. That's why they don't make bunches of noise. That's why they, spray things on their clothes to cover up the scent, because they want the animal or whatever they're hunting, they want it to think that there's nothing to be worried about. And if that animal becomes complacent, their alertness level drops. They stop looking. They put their head down to eat. They stop checking the wind. They lay down and rest. That's when we step into complacency, we lose our alertness level. What's the danger of complacency? Well, my pastor likes to say, shout out to Pastor Williams at New Purpose Ministries. My pastor likes to say that the worst problem I will ever face in my faith and in my recovery, I guess he would say too, is myself. The danger, what we're opening ourselves up to in complacency is we start becoming our own definition of safety. We start becoming our own definition of good. because we stop reaching for something more. We stop stretching for something more. We look at ourselves in the mirror. We say, you know what? You got this. You don't need to worry about anything else. Like you've arrived. You've done this. You're good. Just chill. It's okay. Complacency can appear. It can be camouflaged as a lot of things. But what sets it apart? What helps you to tell? Okay, it's not acceptance. It's not self-love. It's not surrender. It's complacency. How you know it's complacency is there is a sometimes a gradual, but it is absolute, meaning it doesn't stop. It continues to grow. There's a growing decrease of awareness of the need for vigilance, awareness of the need to do recovery work, awareness of the need to do the work of faith, and the value just drops down. Like we just realize we just begin to believe I don't need to read my Bible. I'm good. My faith is good. I don't need to spend time praying. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. And that's what gives the complacency. Acceptance, self-love, surrender. These things will happen, and we'll say things. We'll look in the mirror and say, hey, you're good. But we'll keep doing the work. Complacency is like those things, but it shuts down the work. We stop doing the things that keep us alive. And that's complacency. That's the danger of complacency. So how do we avoid complacency? I actually thought about this for quite a while. And some of you know, and those of you that don't now, you're getting ready to. I grew up in a very performance-based religion, and I owe a lot to my faith community. They gave me a lot that was good. But one of the things I inherited from them that was not so good was a very performance-oriented religion. And so as I was thinking of an answer, how do we avoid complacency? How do we get out of complacency? What do we do? I wanted to be careful not to slide into that. I wanted to be careful not to quote a scripture, I wanted to be careful not to take up again the yoke of bondage. How do we avoid this settling for less? How do we avoid this decrease in vigilance? How do we avoid this stopping doing the work because it seems like we don't need to because things are going so well? How do we avoid that? And I'll tell you two things, two pieces of an answer that came to me. First of all, gratitude. In a sneaky way, in a very hidden way, complacency is built on, and complacency is a form of arrogance. I don't need more. I don't need to grow. I am beyond needing whatever it is. There's some arrogance in complacency. Gratitude kills arrogance. So gratitude is one part of the answer. And I think the other part of the answer is really probably as close to the theory of everything as I'll ever come when it comes to faith and recovery. The answer is relationship. It's relationship. So relationship with my higher power, relationship with other divine imagers, relationship with people who care about me and who I care about, relationship with myself. So making sure my relationship with myself is intact. This is how we avoid, and this is how we overcome complacency. Thinking of relationship and gratitude, how would you actually do that? I think I would start with gratitude. I would look at my 1-year token. I would look at my 10-year chip, and I would say, you know what? I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have this sobriety. I'm grateful to have this clean time. I'm grateful that I have been given, and right there, arrogance starts to be put to bed, shut out. Because gratitude correctly orients me with the benefactors in my life. People who have poured into me, my higher power who has poured into me. Gratitude puts me in the right relationship, and there's the relationship. So I would say start with gratitude. If complacency is something I'm finding myself falling into, I would start with gratitude. And I would look at the things that I have achieved or the things that I've accomplished, the things I've been given, and I would say, I'm grateful for this. Once that gratitude is firmly in place, then I would look and see which relationships am I a part of that increase my gratitude, bring my gratitude level up. Which relationships encourage gratitude in me? And the relationships that encourage gratitude, those are the ones I pursue. The relationships that do not encourage gratitude, those are the ones I let go. And I believe that would be a good path out of complacency or a good preventative measure against complacency. Because gratitude implies that I'm receiving. Gratitude is that movement that we're talking about, that complacency shuts down movement, shuts down momentum. Gratitude actually calls me forward into more momentum because gratitude is based on receiving and taking in and growing. That's what gratitude is based on. So that would be a big piece there. I have really enjoyed spending the last few minutes with you all. I trust this was beneficial to you. I trust that this is something you can use. If you have another topic you'd like me to address from the standpoint of faith and recovery, I would love to respond to anything you would want to put in the comments, within reason, of course. If you want to comment on this Facebook Live, feel free. I would love to see your feedback. And if you have something, like I said, something you'd like me to address in maybe some subsequent Facebook Lives, that would be great. You can leave that in the comments too. You can always message me. I do check my messages on Facebook. You can also go to my website, faithandrecovery.net. Now, when you type that in, you have to put www.faithandrecovery.net. I don't know exactly why. I'm not that tech savvy, but it does make a difference. You can go there. You can find these videos there. You can find more information about addiction. You can find resources there, some other videos that I've done. Once we drop the podcast, that's where the podcast is going to live as well. I also have a YouTube channel, so Faith and Recovery YouTube channel. It's Faith and the ampersand and Recovery. You can also look for my name, Brian Shields, on YouTube, and it might bring it up that way too. So anywhere that you can find my stuff, feel free to look it up. And if you have comments or questions or anything you'd like me to address, feel free and let me know. And I will see you all next Friday. Love you all.